introduce our speaker and our moderator today. Quinn Eddins is Director of Research and Analysis for the state of Florida. As a thought leader for the state, Quinn leads Florida's research teams and is responsible for generating market intelligence, ensuring clients receive timely and strategic research information. Prior to CBRE, Quinn was Director of Research for Radar Logic, a New York-based real estate data and analytics company serving the financial industries. He has experience in finance, real estate, capital markets, and business development. He holds a graduate degree in real estate development and city planning from MIT. That's where I got my bachelor's degree. No, actually, Indiana. In addition, he holds a BA in humanities from Stanford University. That's where I got my master's. And an MA in Middle Eastern Studies from Harvard. I didn't go there. Welcome, Quinn Eddins.
I didn't realize that we were going to be graded 1 to 5, so suddenly I find myself shaking in my boots. So wish me luck. My objective here today and the objective of the panel will be to increase our shared understanding of the resilience challenges Miami faces, the difficulties we face when addressing these challenges, and possible steps we can take towards overcoming these difficulties and finding solutions. Later on, I'll ask the members of our esteemed panel to introduce themselves and provide a brief overview of their areas of expertise, and then we'll move on to what I hope will be a free-flowing and informative conversation. But first, I'll take about 20 minutes to provide some context for our discussion. And I'll start, like so many high school essays, by defining the key concept. The Urban Land Institute defines resilience as the ability to prepare and plan for, recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events. So the concept is pretty straightforward. Resilience is an ability. It's a capacity that can be built through preparation. And it's the ability then to adapt to recover from adversity. Some additional key concepts are introduced by the definition used by the 100 Resilient Cities program that's funded and founded by the Rockefeller Foundation. The 100 Cities program defines resilience as the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what kinds of stresses and acute shocks they experience. So this definition tells us with whom that ability lies, and therefore the responsibility lies for increasing resilience. It's the individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems, pretty much everybody. And this is an important point, and one that the panelists and I will come back to and again. Building the capacity for resilience is a collective effort, and collaboration between all stakeholders, government, the business community, and academia is essential if we are going to be successful. The 100 Resilient Cities definition also adds the useful nuance in the concept of adversity by introducing the twin concepts of chronic stress and acute shocks. Chronic stresses weaken the fabric of the city on a daily or cyclical basis, whereas acute shocks are sudden and sharp events that threaten the city. So now I'm going to pause for a little digression. Believe it or not, this isn't going to be all about doom and gloom about Miami. I direct research at CBRE, and my primary consumers of my research are commercial real estate brokers, and as such, my typical role is to rhapsodize about Miami's commercial real estate markets, its rapid population and economic growth, its strong global connections in trade, finance, culture, and the arts, as one of my brokers puts it, to sell the dream of Miami. And this role comes naturally to me. I am genuinely bullish about South Florida's prospects in general and the prospects for its commercial real estate markets in particular. So I do not see Miami in its commercial real estate markets in a doom and gloom, sky is falling perspective. However, as the researcher, I need to be tethered to reality and soberly confront challenges our industry and community face with a clear and objective gaze. So while we can't be chicken littles saying the sky is falling, we also can't be ostriches with our head in the sand. So with that in mind, And despite all of my rosiness is general outlook, I am going to take the next 10 minutes or so to talk about these stresses and these shocks as context for our future and continuing conversation. So the 100 Resilient Cities project has identified a number of resilience challenges facing South Florida. Chronic stresses include the lack of affordable housing, an overtaxed transportation system, pronounced poverty, and a rising sea level and coastal erosion. The region also is vulnerable to a number of acute shocks, including coastal and rainfall flooding and infrastructure failure. Well, now, we're not going to have a chance to talk about all of these today. Rather, we're going to focus on 4. The first being a lack of affordable housing, which our panelist Javier Avino will speak to in greater detail in a few minutes. So according to research recently published by Realtor.com, Miami is one of the least affordable cities in the country. In 2015, the Miami resident with the median metropolitan income, actually there's maybe more than one, a Miami resident with median metropolitan income, who purchased a median priced home with a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, paid 42% of their income towards housing costs. That's the 5th highest rate in the country. The same report found that a Miami renter with the median metropolitan income who rents an apartment at the median metropolitan rent pays about 40% of their income towards housing costs. Now, for perspective, the target ratio for affordability is 28%. So by these metrics, neither owning nor renting is affordable for those who make the median income in Miami. And a complementary study by apartmentlist.com found that a full 2/3 of renters in Miami are cost burdened, meaning that they pay 30% or more of their incomes in rents. And this was the highest percentage of any metropolitan that they analyzed, of about 50. So affordability is a real challenge. And another resiliency challenge we will discuss today is our overtaxed transportation system that was alluded to by the previous speaker. Our panelist, John Daum, will discuss some potential solutions to this challenge. But for now, to provide context, I want to share the results of a recent analysis by TomTom, the Dutch mapping and travel analytics company. They have a database of some 14 trillion historical time travel measurements, and upon analyzing that database, they found that Miami has some of the worst traffic congestion in the country. No surprise, I'm sure, to anyone here. So, according to the TomTom study, Miami has a congestion level of 28%, which means that drivers spend 28% more time on the roads when there's traffic than when the traffic is just flowing freely. That's the 7th highest level among U.S. metropolitan areas. Now, you might say 28% doesn't sound so bad, but that is the total extra travel time considering all times of day. When you look at rush hours, the situation is much worse. During the morning peak congestion, Miami drivers spend 48% longer on the roads than they would in a free-flowing situation, and during the evening peak, the commute can take 59% longer than it would in a free-flowing situation. And when you multiply these delays by 230 working days a year, you get to 125 hours of wasted time in traffic every year. Now think about that. That's a lot of lost productivity. That's 3 40-hour work weeks. Now no one here only works 40 hours a week, so that's 2.5 50-hour work weeks, or 1 125-hour work week like Mike Silver puts in. So another resiliency challenge that we're going to discuss here. Sorry, jumped ahead. And the situation's only getting worse. From 2010 to 2015, the congestion level grew from 21% extra time to 28%. And the reason for that increase in time behind the wheel is no mystery. The population has grown by 430,000 people in South Florida over the last 5 years, and it's projected to continue to grow at a similar rate over the next 5 years. The University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research forecasts that the South Florida population is going to grow by some 356,000 new residents by 2020, and that's just their most likely scenario. Their high side forecast calls for 614,000 additional residents. Barring some pretty rapid expansion of our transportation system, or a radical transformation of the way that we commute, and I think John is going to talk about that a little bit, we're looking at only increasing congestion moving forward. So the last two resilience challenges that I'm going to discuss are related. They're coastal flooding and sea level rise. And Wayne, I think, will speak to both, but I've separated them here because coastal flooding is a risk that we currently face, and it's going to increase independent of sea level rise. So even if you're of the mind that climate change is a hoax and sea level rise is a lie perpetrated by the Chinese, you still have to contend with increasing coastal flooding, because one of the primary drivers of our risk to coastal flooding is population growth and increased coastal investment. So it's no mystery to any of us why we are exposed to coastal flooding. We are vulnerable to hurricanes. NOAA estimates that there's a 16% chance every hurricane season that Miami will be impacted by a hurricane. And impacted in this context means within 60 miles of a hurricane. We are, of course, coastal. We are also a low-lying community. The average elevation in Miami-Dade County is just under 6 feet, which is problematic when you consider that given the topography of our coastline, hurricanes can generate storm surges of 12 feet or more. And the most vulnerable areas are also those that are, to storm surges, are also those that are the fastest growing. Brickell, downtown Miami, and Miami Beach. So there was an interesting study done by OECD and World Bank risk modelers a few years ago, who they looked at the average annual losses. They modeled the average annual losses susceptible that are threatening 160 metropolitan areas around the world in 2005, and they projected those risks out into the future. And they did it under a number of scenarios. And one of the scenarios is no sea level rise, just projected population growth and population density growth and investment in these communities. And they found that with these socioeconomic trends alone, in Miami, we can see our average annual losses due to coastal flooding increased by a multiple of 3 between 2005 and 2050. So forget sea level rise, that's just by the fact that there are more of us building more commercial real estate and condos and residences in flood-prone areas, or it's going to increase our risk. And then you layer on sea level rise and coastal erosion. So again, the reasons why we're at risk are similar to those we discussed, or I discussed, for coastal flooding. We are coastal and we are low-lying, but with sea level rise, there's an additional challenge of our bedrock. Miami is built on limestone, which is porous, the result of eons of coral reefs aggregating into the rock on which we stand. And the porous nature of that limestone means that we don't only have to worry about water coming in from the ocean and from the bay, or to the west from the Everglades, but also coming up from below as saltwater intrudes into our aquifers, our freshwater aquifers, threatening our freshwater supply, and ultimately makes the ground less capable of absorbing flooding from rain or other sources, and generally compounds the risks of coastal flooding. So the World Bank OECD analysis I mentioned before, when they overlay, and this is for Miami, when they overlay the risk into their models just 20 centimeters of sea level rise, which is a little less than 8 inches between now and 2050, which is a conservative to moderate estimate. There have been estimates of much more from some of the scientific community. We're looking at almost in the multiple of 11 the risk in terms of average annual loss due to the sea level rise and just population growth and investment growth. But not to end on a negative note, again, the thrust of our conversation is going to be on solutions. And solutions do exist for these challenges. They are, and our panel will help discuss that. There are solutions that are being executed by other communities around the world. But if we're going to be successful in applying those solutions, there needs to be a collaboration across a wide range of stakeholders, as I mentioned before, academia, the scientific community, the public sector at all levels, and various members of the private sector. And so with that concludes my introduction. Now I'd like to invite my panelists up onto the stage.